Hi, I'm Latrina Patrick with Greater Vision Consulting. I specialize in working with nonprofit organizations to help them build their capacity, primarily through getting their programs developed so that they are more competitive when they apply for grant funding and ultimately more successful. I also work with new and inspiring grant writers through my training and development services to help them learn how to write effective, successful grants. Today, I want to continue my discussion about the top 10 mistakes that grant writers make that leads to not getting funded. Yesterday, I kicked off this series with number 10, which is they lack community support or they don't demonstrate community support. And today, for number 9, what I want to discuss is that ninth mistake is that they have a poorly written budget and no fiscal capacity. And I want to tackle the budget in those two things because overall, when you are looking at larger grants like federal and state grants, budgets don't accumulate a lot of points, usually 5 to 10 points. Overall, that makes a big difference when you're scoring the overall application, but in comparison to the whole grant, it's usually smaller, less points, but it still can impact you because that's a big piece of the puzzle, and that's looking at whether or not the organization has the fiscal capacity to be able to implement the program they're proposing. The biggest mistake, though, that grant writers make is that they don't connect their budget to their proposal narrative. One of my favorite things to say is that the narrative drives your budget. So you don't want to get to the budget and then there are costs in there that don't add up in the sense of it doesn't fit in with anything that was written in the proposal. So you have to make sure that your budget reflects the narrative. So for example, you don't want to have something in the budget about purchasing a vehicle or leasing a vehicle for an after-school program that you never even mention in the narrative. You don't want to have fees for personnel or contractors for services that have nothing to do with what you wrote. That's a big mistake that immature in the sense of not being in the field for a long time grant writers do. You really got to make sure that you give just as much attention to that budget as you do to that narrative, and the budget itself is going to have a budget narrative that goes along with it. So you have to justify all those expenses in the budget narrative that you put into your actual budget. And it makes it a lot easier to do that when you've connected the two to your actual program narrative. And the other part is obviously having the fiscal capacity. You got to have the fiscal capacity to be able to implement the program. And with that being said, you have to be mindful that if your organizational budget is less than the amount that you are requesting from the funder, it's not going to look good for you. So just make sure you're aware that you have to be able to implement your programs as being reimbursable acts and that you won't get that money right away. So if you can't operate your program without that funding from the feds or whoever the funder is, then you're not going to be very successful. Now, if you want more tips about how you can be an effective, successful grant writer, I have a class that's coming up that's designed just for you. Coming up in August, I'm going to kick off a 4-week boot camp. And it's a grant writing 101 class that's designed specifically for beginners. So I want you to go over to my website at www.greatervisionconsulting.com and click on the training link at the top of the page and you'll get more information about that. Now, if you get registered between now and July 31st, you'll get an early bird discount rate, which cuts $50 off the cost. So go over to that page and check that out as soon as you possibly can. And while you're on the website, I ask you to please subscribe to my email updates. You'll get more information about training and events that are coming up in the future. And if you do that, I'm giving a promotional offer for a limited time where if you are new to the site, go over and register and you will get a free copy of my introduction to grant writing training. So go over to my website, www.greatervisionconsulting.com. And tune in tomorrow for the third tip in our top 10 mistakes that grant writers make that lead to not getting funded. Talk to you soon. Bye.